Radical acceptance requires two things: truth and responsibility. So I'm going to give you 7 questions that you can ask yourself to find the truth, and 4 questions you can ask yourself so you can take responsibility. Now, before I do that, there are 2 truths that I have to state. The first one is this: we play a part in every aspect and every situation we ever experience in our life, whether it's a relationship, a friendship, any aspect where we can't forgive somebody and we can't accept an outcome. We have played a part in it, and we must accept that truth. We are not always victimized because we made a choice to step out of our house. We can never divorce ourselves or relinquish the responsibility that we made an active choice to go in a certain direction. Truth number 1, we played an active part in every aspect of our life situation. Truth number 2, everyone thinks they live in truth, but studies show that even the most honest person lies to themselves 10 to 200 times a day. Now, I know you don't think that you do that, but it happens really easy. Oh, I don't need to lose weight. Oh, that cookie won't hurt me. It's just one. I can go to the gym tomorrow. All the little subtle lies that we tell ourselves of, for me, I don't need to use my blinker. There isn't a car behind me that needs to see my blinker. These are all little subtle lies, that we tell ourselves. It's not always, we tell somebody directly. It's mostly how we lie to ourselves and don't live in truth and take responsibility for those little lies that we tell ourselves. All right? Now, to recover from this requires denial and self-deception work. And that's what these questions are going to help you do. So the 7 questions to ask yourself to find truth is, what did I get from this situation? This is a tough one because people in high self-deception and high denial will just, oh, nothing, I didn't want this. And I get it. That's somebody who's really early in the journey. But there's always a benefit, especially people who pick a bad person. Here's what we get. We get so much from it. We get so much from terrible situations. I don't have to be vulnerable because they were an alcoholic. I got to play the victim, and I call mom, dad, brothers, friends, post on Facebook, join groups, so I could talk about how terrible they were. And this is a great way where now I can have satellites. I can have all these people give me love and attention, but I never have to give it back. And so I get to stay the victim and use these people for the love and attention because I don't know how to stand up for myself. And so this allows me to stay the child instead of being an adult and putting boundaries in place and not allowing this behavior in my life, because remember, I'm responsible for it. I can go on and on. And there's just a little window in. So look at yourself. You got a tremendous amount from this situation. And that moves to question number 2. How did it allow me to play the victim? Because if we're not in radical acceptance, somewhere in this process of what we're struggling with, we're stuck in victimhood. We do not want to take responsibility for our part. We don't want to admit. We go, oh, that's victim blaming. No, being responsible for our life choices and that we let this man or woman into our life is called adult responsibility. You can't divorce yourself from that or take ownership of that. That doesn't condone their poor behavior, and it doesn't mean they shouldn't be held accountable and face the consequences of their poor behavior. Those are 2 different topics. One topic is about them, which we can't control, but we can control ourselves. And so we need to ask, why did I do this? What did I get from picking this type of person? How did it let me play the victim? And use all these people around me? And so, number 3, it allowed me to stay the child. That's the beauty of it. Oops, just kicked the camera. Well, I guess you guys are wake you up there. What people don't understand, well, many people, I don't know that everyone, but when they're stuck in this place, they're stuck in a childlike place because a child never takes responsibility. They're too young. You haven't learned it. And so they blame everyone and everything. And if we're not accepting of life and its limitations and how difficult a lot of these situations are, and that we're not to blame. There's just so much to learn about life, and so we don't always have the answers. But the inability to accept life on life's terms is a childlike position. And ultimately, the reason we do this is because in our childhood, we were abandoned in some way. Now, many people, oh, my parents, my grandparents were perfect. No, they weren't. They're human. I'm sure they loved you. For those, many people like, no, my parents were terrible. But there are many people in massive self-deception and denial that their parents, they didn't experience any trauma in childhood. Well, no parent is a god and perfect. They all make mistakes. They all abandon us at times. It's just part of life. And in those moments, that's where that inner wound is stuck in us. And so that's what we're dropping back to when we don't accept. We're that child, and we're trying to get the world to be our parent. The parent who wasn't there, who didn't pick you up from soccer practice, who was late for this, all of those little things. That's what you're experiencing when you're lacking radical acceptance, is the wounded child in you who's trying to stay the child and get the world to be your parent. Number 4, how did it allow me to not take responsibility and make them and the world my parent? Do you see how even as I talk about one, it just leads it, they're all conjoined. It's all part of it. And so, like I just said, we drop into that wounded child state. And the reason we do that is the victim position is an attempt by us to get the world to be the parent we never had. Now, don't get me wrong, grief, I'm not saying you should just be stoic and shouldn't be upset about any of this or complain, that's part of the recovery process. It is healthy and normal to moan and point the finger at them and all of that. That's wonderful. We need to do that. But we can't stay stuck there. And somebody without radical acceptance is stuck in the childlike position, asking the world to be their parent, instead of taking adult responsibility, moving and learning how to mature out of that childlike victim position. All right? And so they need to start recognizing, wait a minute, who am I placing in the world as my parent to try and fix this situation and avoid taking responsibility for doing it to myself? Number 5, how did it allow me to make them the guilty one? This is what's called the disempowered victim position, and it's a narcissistic position. So the people that are stuck without radical acceptance, they tend to fall into more that disempowered codependent, who then covertly becomes falsely empowered by being the perfect one. The one who doesn't have the bad childhood, who didn't do anything wrong, doesn't deserve it, and no, I'm not being the victim, no, I'm not getting they have defenses for everything. They won't live in truth and take responsibility. And it's a very covert, narcissistic one-up position, just like a child, that's what children do. It's a very immature stance. And I'm not trying to denigrate people, I'm just talking, this is the psychology of what's happening to that person. They've dropped into a childlike state, and they're not aware of it. They think they're an adult, but they're not processing as a healthy, mature, and moderate adult who's processed their emotions, who has emotional mastery, has done the recovery work to mature out of this. All of us, have gone through this. Nobody is immune from living these dynamics in childhood. All right? And so that's what's happening, is it allows us to make them the guilty one, and that gives us power over them. All right? Number 6, how did it allow me to blame them? It's the same thing. These are power dynamics, because we feel so disempowered, just like when we were a child and mom was late and didn't show up, and dad, and all these different things. We were the child. We had no ability to change the situation. And so that's where we learned these covert dynamics to manipulate power, to go for guilt and blame and all of that, because we couldn't stand up and go, Dad, this isn't going to work. From now on, I'm taking the car. I know I'm only 6 years old, but I will not tolerate this behavior. We can't set boundaries with our parents. We're kids. And they're just human, and they're doing the best they can. But we use the skills and tools that only a child has available to them, and that's covert manipulative dynamics. Are they bad kids? Are any of us bad kids? No. It's a survival mechanism. It's nothing to judge or blame yourself for or feel bad about. You didn't do anything wrong. You just survived. You did the right thing. It's actually a gifted, what a great strategy. Like, really, it's brilliant. Here's a very young child who figures out how to outsmart mom and dad so that they can stay alive. That is nothing to be ashamed of. That is nothing to belittle yourself for. It's a gift. Now, the problem is it only works when you're a child. It doesn't work in the adult world. As adults, we need to live in truth and take responsibility if we want healthy relationships and we want acceptance of life on life's terms. All right? Number 7, here's the final power dynamic that's involved here is how does holding on to this resentment and the lack of acceptance and this situation, how did it allow me to resent, hate, and release my anger on them? All right, so say you were the narcissist. Do you see how not taking responsibility that out of the millions of people on the planet, you pick this person? Now, all of that childhood pain you can dump on them, and it's covert and manipulative from that disempowered victim position. All right, again, not because you're bad, but just because you weren't taught this is how it works. And so all of this stored rage of all of the perfect imperfections of your parents, or for those of you who were severely mistreated, but the comments I mostly get are from the ones who say their parents were perfect, and that's not it. It's something else. It's the other part. No, this isn't true. It's always, they have to, they're so stuck on that victim position, and they're so stuck as a child, they will not let this truth in, that they played a part, and they have a responsibility. They're not to blame, but they will use covert tactics by calling me a victim blamer and all these different things so that they don't have to take responsibility, and they can dump their hate, their resentment, and their blame on me. Well, it's not about me. It's about their parents and their childhood. Like, I get it. I don't take it personal. I'm human. Some days I get all fired. I'm like, "Rah!" and I'm about to respond. I'm like, "Kenny, stop. Who's the child now? Me." But it's okay if I'm imperfect and have moments like that. But I use the skills and tools to get myself back into truth and take responsibility. And I look at, wait a minute, Kenny, why are you fired up about this person who's dumping their unhealed childhood pain on you and is not ready to live in truth and take responsibility? What are you not willing to take responsibility for, Kenny? Why is this triggering you? And so then I look at, oh my God, I've just put my father's face on them. It's what happens in those moments. I've now become the disempowered child who, even in the face of truth, I could hold up, I don't know, a water balloon, and my dad would call it pizza. If my dad didn't want to admit to something, doesn't matter. Even with all evidence in the world, he wouldn't admit it. So here's that exact same dynamic. I'm laying out exactly how it is. This person doesn't want to admit the truth and take responsibility, and now I see my father's face. And so I'm going to argue back, and there's the child in me. And now I'm being the covert, manipulative, falsely empowered. I'm going to come down and tell them all the research and how I'm so much, man, it's just, but I've done it sometimes. I've left comments, and then, a couple hours later, I'm like, oh my gosh, Kenny, you're such a child. I'm human. It's okay. It happens. But more often than not, almost always, I catch myself when I get fired up. I recognize, oh, I'm trying to make them my father. Well, they don't deserve that. They're in enough pain. The last thing they need is for me to place my father on them. Poor thing, And so I'm able to regulate myself. Now, how do you get into the responsibility? and take responsibility for your actions? Well, there are three questions that kind of just all play right off each other, all right? So the first one is, what do I want? The second is, what will I not tolerate? And the third one is, what can I control? Now, most people have no idea what they want. Well, there's an easy way to find that. What is it you can't tolerate? Because the person who's stuck in that disempowered victim position, who's blaming, resenting, and everything, they're screaming and yelling about everything they can't tolerate. Well, what's the opposite of that? It's what they want. Now, what gets tricky is a lot of what they want is for the other person to be different. That lets you know you're stuck in the child. If you want to change them or demand that their belief system and all of this stuff be, what you want it to be. Because remember what question number 3 is? What can I control? Me. That's it. So if what I can't tolerate is about them, and what I want is about them, then I know I'm barking up the wrong tree. I can look at what I can't tolerate, what is it I want, what can I control about getting what I want? So I can't tolerate that they're a drinker. I want them to quit. What can I control? I can choose to not spend my time around a drinker. That's how I get what I want. That's how I take responsibility. That's how I move out of the disempowered victim position where I'm not taking responsibility and I'm making them my parent, because if they'd quit drinking, then the child in me would feel safe. And now, and I get to make them the guilty one, and I get to blame them, and I can resent them and release all my anger and hate on them. And that's the confirmation of me staying in that childlike position. And so I'm always, question number 3 is the savior. What can I control? Because early on in this process, when you ask, what do I want? And what will I not tolerate? Most often, depending where you are in the recovery journey, those early in the recovery journey, what they'll tend to pick, when they talk about what they can't tolerate, it's usually somebody else's behavior. They want to control somebody because they're caught in that childlike, remember the power dynamics, they're caught in that childlike position. If somebody grows in maturity and learns to stop making the world and everybody else their parent and becomes the parent that they never had, then they start to recognize, wait a minute, what can I not tolerate? It's not that I can't tolerate their drinking. It's that I can't tolerate that I'm allowing this person into my life. What do I want? But do you hear the difference? They started off by blaming their drinking. As they matured, they take responsibility. They no longer blame them. They take ownership of, wow, I let this person into my life. I can't tolerate treating myself this way. That is not what I want. What can I control? Me. What plan can I put in place so that I stop treating myself this way and choosing alcoholics or whatever it is? So that's the maturation process. It usually starts with, can't tolerate this, want them to change, but focus on what you can control, and that helps break that denial and self-deception and disempowered victim position down. And you'll know you're getting further along when you look at a situation, and instead of trying to control other people, places, and things, you see your part in it. You recognize, remember, the 2 truths. We are always responsible. We play a part in every life situation. And so if you can't tolerate something, you'll know you're getting into maturity and moderation when you look at a life situation and you see your part as what you can't tolerate. Then you know what you want. Then you can focus on what you can control, which leads to step number 4 for taking responsibility is, now that you're aware, what is the smallest step you can take in this moment to control what you can, get what you want, and say no to what you will not tolerate in yourself, right? Because ultimately, that's what's happening in the lack of radical acceptance. It's not about them. You can't tolerate yourself and your own behavior. You're not living in truth. You're not taking responsibility. And so as you mature out of that and mature out of that disempowered victim position and the codependence of that, and you get into adult maturity and moderation, you'll look at a life situation and you'll recognize, wow, I put myself in this position. I can't tolerate the way I treat myself. This is what I want. This is what I can control. These are the steps I'm going to take to start loving myself and no longer get stuck in that inability to accept. So again, it's not that we can't accept other people, places, and things. It's that we're not in truth and haven't taken responsibility for the part we've played in the life situations that we can't accept. So, to get into that complete acceptance or forgiveness of any person, place, or thing, you have to remind yourself that you are living in self-deception and denial, and you're not taking responsibility for your part. But once you do, once you shift out of that, you can radically accept anything.